Here I am, being kind of pulled in, not kicking and struggling, but kind of being pulled in. And what I realized is there's a lot of overlap in this community. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap in this community between being a trainer, handler, and some of the other, being a daddy in the ABTL community, or being a sir, or being a master, or all of those things. And we're going to talk a little bit about the similarities and some of the differences shortly. Just a few shout outs and thank yous. Thank you to the archives for having us. I really appreciate having the ability to have a space. It's not a bar to have this talk in. We've had these conversations with folks that wanted to have trainer classes in other cities, and unfortunately or fortunately, the venue that we've had is a bar. So this is nice to have a venue that's not a bar. And this place is run completely on donations. There's a donation box out front. I am not an officer or any at all part of this place, but please, if you have a 1 to 5 or a 10 and you can feel like you give a little bit today on their way out, please drop it in the box because every little bit does count. And the other group, and most importantly, the reason we're here is Chicago Puppy Patrol is putting this on, and I'd like to thank Chicago for hosting me and letting me stand up here and talk to you guys for the next half an hour, 45 minutes. And the last thing that I want to do, I added just briefly to my notes today. And for those of you that do know me and know Scout, we are heavily into suicide prevention and suicide awareness. We've talked about it all across the Midwest and in other parts of the country as well. Just recently, one of our own passed. Anyway, I'd like to take a moment of silence for Tom Moran, just briefly. Thank you. I know this isn't about that, but a lot of us here today were affected by that. So, what we're going to do today are why handlers. Everybody hears puppy, 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 puppy this, puppy that, puppy that, puppy this, puppy, you're into no good. Let's go to the puppy mosh. Well, there's this whole other side that sometimes gets a little bit put on the back burner and is, in my opinion, because I am one, just as important as the puppy community. Now, I will say that unlike other communities, the trainer, handler, owner is not necessarily quite necessary, and we're missing one of our panelists who's going to talk about what it's like to be a stray or a solo pup. We have 3 amazing panelists today. Nice segue. That is going to be helping me. I picked these folks very specifically before their relationships in the puppy community. I'll just briefly mention their names now. When we have the panel, I'll go into a little bit more detail about them. Pup Rococo, who is on our very left wearing the pink hair. He's the really skinny one. He's actually stuck in traffic. He's on his way. He texted me. He left 45 minutes ago. He lives 15 minutes from here in Chicago.
They've got streets closed.
Pups Drive, Pup Spike, and Pup Scout. So these are going to be our panelists. It's going to talk about things that they look for in puppies, and going to take questions from the audience as well. What I'm going to talk about is there's really no one right way to be a trainer or a handler, but I want to give us all a little understanding of what some decent vernacular is that you hear people talking about different terms, and I want to kind of bring some common language together so we can all speak the same thing for a little bit. Now, I'm not here to advocate you being a trainer or a handler, or however you do that is up to you. But in order for us to have a conversation today, we need to keep the language the same. So I'm going to introduce some definitions of the way that I see trainer and handler, and that commonly trainer and handler is referred to. Although there's no one right way of doing things, there's definitely wrong ways of doing things. And so this is designed for the person that's not necessarily in the puppy and handler community, but it's in another kink community, or that's in the leather community, the fetish community, or it might be introducing themselves into the puppy and handler community that just want a little bit more information about some of the wrong ways to do things on. And so for those of you that have been doing this for a while, some of the things I'm going to say are going to be a little bit basic. But it's a good place to start. And so let's start with some things that we probably don't want. And those things are, if you see a puppy wearing gear out in public, at a bar, market days is coming up. At market days, don't pull on their hood. Don't pull on their collars. Don't pull on their tails. That's just not kosher. And we see that time and time and time again where those things happen, and then the puppy gets mad, or their owner, handler, trainer gets mad, and it ends up not ending well unless someone has a cool head. Now, oftentimes this occurs late at night in a bar when someone's popping out, or in headspace, which we'll talk about a little bit too. And when that happens, there's frequently alcohol involved, and the person doing it doesn't mean any harm, but they think that it's cool, and so they're trying to play with the puppy the best way that they know how to. So, a couple of things. If you're going to play with a puppy and you see them out and they have an owner or a handler, you should ask the owner or handler first. We'll talk about why that's important in a little bit. Scratches and rubs are okay, and in fact, into the Chicago Puppy Patrol, we actually have an official scritcher, and she's the most amazing person in the world. So if you need scritches and you're out and you see Chicago Puppy Patrol, find her and she will give you free scritches. As with bio dogs, you can generally read the mood of a puppy. And so if they're playful and they want to play, that's fine, but if they're reclusive, or if they're laying down, or if they look like they don't want to interact with you, or if they growl at you, that's probably a good idea not to necessarily try to interact with them, especially if they growl at you. Not all pups are bottoms. That's a misconception that are out there, and not all owners, handlers, and trainers are tops. And so it really depends on the individual dynamic that is out there and the people that are involved in the relationships. As well as when pups are in a headspace, and we'll talk a little bit about headspace in a minute, they are sometimes in a place where they're not able to respond as someone from the outside would expect a human being to respond. They may not talk. They may only use curled paws. They may whimper. They may walk over to what they want. And those aren't normal expectations that someone in the non-puppy trainer community would have. So it's really important as a trainer handler, or if you're coming into this community, to accept those particular norms and be patient with puppies in headspace, especially if they're trying to communicate with you using something other than the human language. So what is the language that we're speaking here? We all know puppy. Anybody want to throw a definition out of what they think puppy is? Okay, so one of the things about me let me take that out. One of the things about me talking here is that I like to have interactive, fun, exciting classes. I'm having a class, but this is just my perspective. There are people out there that have been doing this longer than me. There are people out there that have different perspectives than I do. There are Tootsie Pops on the table. What?
Candy questions. It's incentive.
Candy questions. So, this will be as exciting as you guys make it, and I'm excited. So, one more time, does anybody have a definition of puppy they want to share?
Woof, or I'm going to choose a random.
Woof. Okay.
I can only speak for myself. As a puppy, impetuous.
Impetuous, okay.
A human that gets in the headspace of a dog for an extended period or a short period of time.
Okay.
Do you want candy?
He just wants candy.
Yeah.
Alright, we're not going to be throwing Tootsie Pops. So, everybody turning points. This is our other judge. So language, you all hear a lot about handler, and about trainer, and about owner, or sir, or daddy, and oftentimes we use those things interchangeably. Today I'm going to use specific definitions for this nomenclature, so we all have this, we're all on the same page, and we all talk about things the same way. One of the things that I identify a handler as, and that most people identify a handler as, is someone who handles a single puppy or a group of puppies in a space that involves either puppies playing with each other, a puppy playing with another individual, or a puppy playing by himself and needing to get in and out of gear. And so you're handling, if you will, or making sure that what's going on with that puppy is safe, and they're doing things that they like to do, and that the area around what they're doing is appropriate for whatever it is that they're doing as a puppy. So you're handling them. I like to refer to this, when I get asked questions about it, as the handler for a scuba diver. Do we have any scuba divers in here? One? And so when you dive, you don't dive by yourself. You always have someone in the boat that's with you, or you should, that is the person that you have that's going to help you with your equipment, that's going to help you with your lines, that's going to put that oxygen tank on and off to make sure that you're doing things correctly. So that person is a handler. Much in the furry community, where you have someone with you to make sure that that space is available and surrounding and safe, that person is a handler too. So this is not a new concept, but that's what I refer to when I'm talking about a person that's a non-puppy that is in the community as a handler. In my mind, how is that different from a trainer? And there are some more differences. You can be a handler of many different puppies, but have never trained them. A trainer is someone who enters into, again, my definitions, my nomenclature today. A trainer is someone who enters into a contract with an individual puppy or a group of puppies to teach them to do certain things that they want to do, that the trainer wants them to do, and that there's been this mutual agreement between them that those are things that they're going to learn. It may very well be the language of communication non-verbally as a puppy. It could be how to play as a puppy. Some puppies need that type of training in order to get into headspace. It could be nothing more than how to work with a leash. And so it depends on the relationship between the trainer and the puppy, but that is kind of what I think of when I think about a trainer. The third definition that I like to, or word that I like to throw out there, is an owner, or a sir, or a daddy. And how is that different than a trainer or a handler? And that's the person that identifies with the puppy as being the one that controls them, if you will. And I don't like using that word because it has negative connotations. But it's the person that the puppy looks up to and respects and would go to if he or she felt like there was a problem or a need to communicate something going on in their relationship. It's a much different relationship than a training relationship or a handling relationship. You don't have to know a whole lot about the puppy community to be an owner, to be a handler, or to be an owner or a sir. Because there are handlers and trainers for that. Now, oftentimes, all three of these terms go part and parcel into the same person, where you have a handler, a trainer, and an owner all together. I'm a handler, trainer, and owner. I own Scout, I'm his handler, and I've been his trainer. I've also trained other puppies that I am neither owner or handler for, because they're in different states, so I don't get the chance to handle them, but I've had the opportunity to train them. And I have been a handler for other puppies in the past that I've not been an owner for. In fact, one of them is very stray, no one's ever going to own him. But I've been a handler for him, and when he comes to town, I oftentimes will be his handler while he's here. So those phrases are used interchangeably, but oftentimes they can be the same person. Any questions about the nomenclature so far? Yeah?
Actually, it was just, you don't like the word control, but the authoritative figure in their life is maybe a better way to say it. You said you don't like the word control.
That's true, I don't. An authoritative figure works as well, but the person responsible for, I like even better, I think. Authoritative figure is probably still a little strong in my mind, but there is that superior-inferior dominant sub-relationship that is in effect, and that person is the dominant person. You know, I often get asked, what makes a good trainer? What do I think makes a good handler or trainer? And you know, the three answers that I give for that are patience, number one, because this may be the 5th or 6th or 7th puppy that you had, but the puppy that you're with is probably going to be their first experience. Or if it's not, they've had completely different experiences, and you're trying to get them to do things that you two have agreed on together, but their own mindset is from what they've done in the past that they don't have, they're trying to unlearn bad habits and relearn new habits. So patience is the first thing. The second thing is confidence. And when I say confidence, that doesn't mean arrogance or knowing everything. By confidence, what I mean is the ability to articulate and show those things that you know and want to have happen in your puppy on a regular basis, and also the confidence to be able to say, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I need to call for help. Somebody needs to come and help me. And find someone who is confident and competent in doing that, who can help you work through that with your puppy. Part of being confident about being a handler, about being an owner, about being a trainer, is having that confidence to be able to say, I don't know. And I think a lot of times what we have this fear in the non-puppy component of a handler-trainer focus that we're supposed to know everything. My focus comes from this as a daddy. There is a lot that Scout taught me and that other puppies taught me on my road to being a handler trainer that had nothing to do with the realm of being, if you will, an owner or a dad. And so that confidence is really, really important. And the third thing that I say is compassion and playfulness. Because being in this role is supposed to be fun. And so that compassion and playfulness really should come out when you're doing this. And those two things, in my mind, go hand in hand. You have to be compassionate to the people that you're working with in a puppy in any kind of role. So what are these roles? What are some things we can do with puppies? What are some things? What do puppies like to do? I see a million puppies in the audience. What do you guys like to do? Romp. Okay. What else?
Nap.
Nap. That's his favorite thing to do. What else?
Belly rubs.
Belly rubs.
Cuddle for scritchy kicks.
Cuddle for scritches. Cuddles is his second favorite thing to do. What else?
Gummy bear.
Gummy bears. Sir, what, you got gummy bears with us right now?
No, they
Oh
all
my
got
God.
IPC. I know. For
Him and Sir Justin are the only two trainers handlers that I've ever met that literally every single time, and I can't say every, that I've ever seen them, they have gummy bears with them. It is just, it's every time, it's just amazing. Where do we fit in? Moshes. Really important to have someone who's not in puppy headspace in a mosh to provide that safety and security, to help to get equipment on and off. It doesn't necessarily have to be your pup. I can tell you, and sort of, Wolf and I have had these conversations, but I'm going to mosh and I'm a handler and a mosh. The mosh is mine. I don't care if it's my puppy or somebody else's puppy. The whole purpose of that mosh is for them to have fun and to be safe. And when you have a bunch of puppies that go into headspace, you don't know who's in headspace deep and who's not in headspace deep. And you need to be that non-puppy person out there available to make sure that knees don't get scuffed, that puppies don't get a little too rough with each other, that they're in headspace, not in headspace so long that they forget that they're supposed to drink water or to take breaks or to rest. So that role is really, really important. Alphas are great, but they need puppy time too. And so it's really important for non-puppies to be in that role as a handler or a handler, we'll just go handler. In this particular case, for the alphas to have some puppy time too. I will say, and this is one of my pet peeves, like in any other BDSM role, whether it be master-slave, whether you're doing role play, or you're doing candle play or East Gym, or in the ABDL community, whether you're working with cribs and diapers or whatever, the furry community or fursuit, when you're in a role that's interacting with these folks, you need to put yourself in their shoes. I've worn Scout's hoods. I've tried his tail on. They're not insertable. You know, I've done a lot of the things. I've been on all fours. I make a terrible puppy. I'll just do it. But that's not who I am, and I understand that. But I love puppies, and so that's important. So, but I've been through all of that, and it's really important that if you're in the handler role, you know what that. I've been in moshes, in that role on all fours. I know how hot and tiring it is. And so those are really important things, to put yourself in their shoes for just a couple of minutes, to put the hood on for just a couple of minutes, if they'll let you. Be careful, some puppies won't let you put their hood on. And try it and see what it feels like on the other side. But that's one thing that we can do in a mosh environment to help out. The other thing is, I have heard puppies say that their handler, their trainer, helps them get in and out of headspace. And this is a really important role for the non-puppy person in the puppy community. And that's to help someone in and out of headspace. That help could be nothing more than putting on a hood. Or it might be putting their harness on. Or maybe starting to talk to them like a puppy. I was looking for a toy. I thought there was one on the desk. I was going to say, that's
Of course.
that's what I was looking for. There we go. That universal sound that starts getting the puppies into headspace. Sometimes they need this. And that non-puppy role to help get them in and out of headspace is important. Getting out of headspace is just as important as getting into headspace. And sometimes when puppies are really deep in headspace, depending upon who the puppy is, they need a lot of help coming out. And knowing your puppy is really important, and this is where that communication or that contract comes from in advance. Knowing who you're working with, like with any other person in this community, the aftercare is important. Starting to talk to them. Bringing them up on what we call all twos, to use that nomenclature, to get them off of all fours to where they start to think and act like a human being again. Giving them something to drink from that's not a straw. And then lastly, for many, but not for all, taking their hood off and getting them back into that human role. Because it's important to slowly bring them out. Now, some puppies can rip their hood off and they can become human, get out of headspace and they don't have a problem. Other puppies, it takes a while, and the deeper they are in headspace, the harder it is to get them out of them. We encountered a puppy at Tri-State who told us that he was in headspace so deeply that it took his handler a really, really long time to pull him out of headspace, and sometimes it took him hours. And so he wanted suggestions as to how to get him out of headspace quicker. Well, that's kind of between him and his trainer handler, but she was really beside herself. And trying to figure out how she could help him get out of headspace a little better. So that's something that we absolutely have a huge role to play for puppies and for non-members of the puppy community. The other thing as a trainer is the one-on-one training. And that really requires the sit down between the handler, trainer, and the puppy to decide what that training is going to look like. But you can do things like training in hand signals, or using a foreign language, or training with a leash. One of the demonstrations that I'm going to do today is leash training. Sir Justin doesn't like leashes. I think leashes help puppies get into headspace. And talking about headspace, I also think leashes help handlers get into handler headspace. Because where there is a puppy headspace, there's also a handler-trainer headspace. We have to be in a certain headspace to start being able to relate to the puppy as a puppy while the puppy's in headspace. That includes increased heightened sense of safety and security when they're in a mosh. That includes making sure that stray people at parties or bars don't decide to grab their puppy. I always have one half eye on Scout. Whether I know where he's completely out or not, I always have a half eye on him so I know when I'm with him, so I know what's going on. So he doesn't end up in a situation where he's lying down as a puppy and someone comes up to him and grabs his collar and it becomes a nasty confrontation, which has happened. And so those things are important. Those things are important to do and to get into your own kind of headspace. And every trainer handler has a different way to get into headspace too. For some, it's carrying around gummy bears. For me, it doesn't take a whole lot other than a squeaky toy or to see a puppy in gear, and that just quickly puts me right into the headspace. And if Vino was here, he would tell you I ran into him at PetSmart right before the felines and canines thing, and I saw him, and he was half in gear and half not in gear while he was there, and he had a very vanilla person with him, and I almost went up and gave him scritches, and I had to stop myself because I wasn't sure really who the person at the time that he was with, and so it was an interesting, oh yeah, hi, how are you, kind of moment. So for me, it doesn't take much. And then play. That's the whole fun, being with puppies. I have 2 bio dogs. They're adorable, but they're old and they don't play. This one I can't get to stop. So play is so much fun, whether it be playing with toys or whether it be them just curling up next to you and squeaking something, or however you want to play. The play is the fun part. That's what we're all here for. It's the play. It's the excitement of doing something to take your mind off of the shootings in the world, and the car accidents, and the DMVs, and the festivals that you can't get to where you're supposed to go to. All of those things. All of those worldly things, the play is the fun of it. That's the escapism that puppy and handler play is all about. And so you can help with that too, and that's the fun of it for me. And then, as many of you know, Scout and I have spent quite a bit of time together with me teaching him to do some tricks. I think his favorite are balancing his little bone on his puppy hood, and it's a little bit easier with his neoprene hood than it was with his leather hood. And the other is play dead because he does it so cutely. And so teaching, as a trainer handler, you can teach him to do tricks as well. And so those are kind of some of the things that you can do as a trainer or a handler. And I guess the next question that people ask me all the time with this is why? It's about the community. Why do you need to be there? Well, we've talked about a few reasons. One of them is, if there was only puppies and there wasn't anybody to give them attention, they would just be, the puppies are attention whores. They really are. They want attention. They want people to scritch them. And so if you're a stranger, they're going to come up to you and they're going to want you to scritch them. They're attention whores. And so that's one reason. But in order to engage them appropriately, you have to understand the community. And so the non-puppy folks that are in the community can help give them the attention that they need, whatever role you want to decide or however you want to call yourself, and you can give them the attention that they need while not being that puppy. So that's one big reason. The fun, and then there's the relationship and belonging aspect of it as well. For Scout and I, that aspect is really strong. There are some puppies where they want to be part of a large group, whether it be Chicago Puppy Patrol, belonging to the leather community, belonging to a family that has all of those mixed things together, master and slave, boys in a sir-boy relationship, and then puppies in the family. Just recently, belonging to the Imperial Court. Where'd he go? I saw him right here. Just recently belonging to the Imperial Court. So belongings and relationships are really important, and having those relationships, you know what? Every boy wants a puppy. When you were 7, you wanted a puppy at least, or a cat, or something, a parakeet, a goldfish. Those relationships are really important, and so that's the other big major component of this is the relationship component. And however those relationships are to you, whatever they look like, if you're in the community, they help you fit in and they help you belong. And so that's kind of what I've got. I've gone a little bit over. Again, these are some basic concepts to get you guys to think. I'm really interested in questions and comments from the audience about things that I've had to say, because I talked and you guys didn't say anything, so I just put it all out there. So now let's do some questions. Questions, comments.
You talked a lot about discussing before entering into a relationship with a puppy about like the training and stuff. The thing I wish you kind of would discuss a little bit is discussing consent and stuff like that prior to that space. I think that's really important for people to understand.
with any relationship that's dominant or that has a dominant and subservient role, and again, I mean, I use those terms loosely, take the definitions how you want, where one person has power over another, and the other person is giving that power over to the person with power. There has to be some defined level of what that relationship looks like. And this is in the master-slave community, it's in the Sir Boy community, it's in the leather community, it's in BDSM, it's in puppy handler, it's in all the communities. It's in the daddy community in the ABDL world as well, the daddy boy community. And so those relationships need to be identified prior to entering into them. Now, part of that identification is learning about each other and knowing who these people, knowing the person that you're talking to is, knowing what their limits and boundaries are, knowing if they have any physical limits, knowing if they have any emotional or psychological limits. My partner had very hard psychological limits, that there were certain things that I could not do because of things that had happened to him in the past. And I knew what those were. But had we not have had those conversations early on in our relationship, I could have done something really dumb that I thought was okay and could have pushed him away forever. Thankfully, that didn't happen because I'm very much believing in open communication. Just ask me, I'll tell you exactly what I think. And so that's not unique to the puppy or trainer community. That is unique to, and it's not unique to our communities as a fetish or a kink community. You have to have those same skills in order to succeed in business, because you've got a boss. They have power over you. You have power over the people that you work with, whether it be position power or informal power. Everybody has a certain amount of power that they're using in some sort of power exchange. We could talk about this for hours, and I won't. But I hope that kind of helps to answer your question a little bit. Other questions? Yes?
I know one that I'm talking about. I have a pup that I handle and train, but he also has a boyfriend, so obviously I'm not his sir in that kind of relationship aspect. And for him, the one thing we talk about a lot is the fact that, and this is my opinion on it, is that pup play itself is not inherently sexual or a sex, like having sex, you know what I mean? Because for him, especially in the kink community, where you're dealing with like bondage or BDSM or pain play or something like that, and oftentimes where the person, maybe the stuff is like naked. Like for instance, when I play with pups, a lot of times they're in a jock strap or naked. So it's kind of like, it can feel, oftentimes, you very much can mix sex with it, and mix sexual aspects in it and sensuality with it, but trying to talk to him about how it doesn't, like if I throw a mosh or something, and I have a whole bunch of puppies over, it's not the same as throwing an orgy, and being, even if I have one pup come over to pup out with me and have me handle or train him, that's not, he doesn't understand that can be a non-sexual experience. So maybe you can kind of, I don't know if other people kind of have experienced that, maybe you can talk a little bit.
Well, that's a great statement, and something that I guess I take for granted. When I say puppy play between the handler and trainer can be whatever you make it, it can be sexual or non-sexual. There are places, there are private moshes where they are sexual moshes, and puppies go to pump other puppies. There are also private moshes where it's just for play and just for fun, and there's squeaky toys involved, and then there are the public moshes as well. One-on-one private trainer stuff can be sexual or not sexual. Where the dynamic comes in that you're referring to is a good understanding and relationship that you should have between the boyfriend and yourself and the puppy. Because that dynamic is really important. So not only do you have to gain the puppy's trust for when he's in headspace and you're the handler or trainer for that puppy, they trust you to be in that role with them, to have that power over them. You also have to gain the boyfriend's trust in that you're not going to do something that he or she, boyfriend, but that he, in some cases, or she, wouldn't want you to be doing with what they feel is under their control. So that relationship dynamic is really important. And it's individual, but it's a trust thing. Yes.
So even to touch a little bit with the delivered stuff, you mentioned earlier and you spoke about as handlers, you know, if I'm going to be, he's from Wisconsin, if he's coming down and handling me, the respect of me talking to Nate to say, hey, you know, I'd like him to come down, can I handle him for the weekend? So that communication with other handlers, if we're handling other puppies, I think is important to protect them out of it.
Yes and no. There should be that communication that takes place if it is available beforehand. But I will tell you two situations that I was in, and I was a handler, and I had to act without other handlers or owners' permissions for the safety of the pup or for the safety of the community. And so the first one was, everybody has heard of the clogging. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details, but there was one particular instance that occurred on the night of the presentations where there were, excuse me. I'm just kidding. During that time, there were a fairly significant group of rowdy pups that were interrupting the performances that night, and so the folks that were running it and myself moved the puppies to a position to where they couldn't, we didn't ask, we just moved them to a position up in the front where they could be better controlled and they were unable to create that ruckus. And so that's one thing. The other was not this IML, but 2 IMLs ago I was a handler in the mosh and I had a puppy who wasn't wearing knee pads, who was in D-pad space and had scraped his knee and was actually bleeding over the moss space. And he had an owner who was on the other side of the room, and I really didn't think that it was appropriate to stop and walk over to talk to his owner and to say, can you pull your puppy out of the pen? I needed to do that myself then and there, and so I spoke with him. We got first aid help for him, you know, I made the decision as the handler of that mosh that he needed to come out for safety reasons. So when you can get that consenting relationship, yes, but you also, by being a handler and trainer in public, there's a responsibility that we have. And our community has, and this is kind of off subject a little bit, and me and my soapbox just a touch, but our community as a puppy and handler and trainer community has a responsibility to the larger kink and fetish community too. We need to be respectful. We're new. We're trying to figure out who we are, and they're still trying to figure out who we are too, and how we're all going to fit and play together in a sandbox. And so when we see things like that as leaders in our community, we need to act, whether you be a puppy or whether you be a handler or a trainer. Wow, my soapbox. Sorry. But I hope that helps to clarify. Yes?
I don't know if you touched on this like before I walked in, but I'm aware that there is an element of mental health benefits and therapeutic aspects in puppy play, especially in that relationship between pups and handlers. I was wondering if you could speak a little more to what those benefits are, and what the therapeutic aspect might be for those, especially those like who are in a more sensitive mental health situation.
In just a short period of time, yes. We've got a whole panel of puppies that I want to get to, but I will speak to that. This is a lecture that we do. It really is the mental health aspects of puppy play. Puppy play, like every other type of, by definition, when you look at from a more global, community-wide standard, puppy play is a form of escapism. And escapism has been around since cavemen, when started riding on walls. And there are certain hormones and biochemicals that are secreted when you do things that you like, that get you away, gets one away from the stresses of everyday life. And to avoid some of the definitions of what I'm talking about, basically if you like something and you don't need to do something to survive, then you're doing something for escapism. Art, music, puppy play, bondage, any of those things technically fall into that role. And so where those things have mental health benefits all fall into the benefits that you get from escapism. Can they go too far? Sure, and one of the things that Scott and I talk about is, you know, when is headspace too much headspace? How far when have you gone into headspace so much that you're now starting to not engage in the world in a realistic manner? And so you can cross the line and go too far as well. So you guys have heard me talk. I've hopefully answered some of your questions. Our panel is going to answer hopefully a lot more of your questions. I didn't just randomly choose these people because they were the ones that were available. I picked 3 different puppies from really 3 different backgrounds. I have a puppy that's in, not necessarily a monogamous relationship, but a very strong relationship with a single owner and handler. We have a puppy that's in kind of a pack relationship. Then we have a puppy that identifies himself kind of as a stray, or an independent, feral, wild, whatever term you want to use. And so the 3 different perspectives will kind of give you a little bit of a larger global sense of what puppies are looking for in a trainer or a handler. Because one of the questions that we get asked all the time and that we see is, I can't find a trainer or a handler. I don't know what to do to look for one. Well, you know, hopefully these guys can clear that up a little bit. So a little bit about our panels. A little bit about our panel. In the middle, we have Pup Spike. He's been in the puppy community for almost 2 years. He was strong in the puppy world as a way to combine his interest in kink and leather with a sense of camaraderie in the community. He enjoys helping other people to alleviate concerns and their insecurities. He leads by example. He's a founding member of the Dog Star Pack, active on several forums, and is like a bulldozer at a mosh, and I can attest. He's an avid, outside of puppy play, he's an avid ice hockey player and a coach. That's Pup Spike. On the left, we have Rococo, a very proud stray, with the exception of his wonderful alpha. And outside the community, he does architectural design. He's really, really smart, basically. And he does a lot of organizing in the community. And then Pup Scout is an active member of the regional, national puppy and handler community. He's spoken at a lot of venues. 2014 Illinois International Best in Show. The current Illinois Leather Alliance Puppy 2016. And Rococo is the past Illinois Leather Alliance puppy and the current Great Lakes puppy, MySash puppy. And so they all have different, I'm trying to read these bios really quickly. They all have different unique tastes. So what questions do you have for them? If not, I have panel questions that we can get things started with. In the back, yes.
Yeah, what they've looked for in their current or previous handlers.
Okay. So question is, what do you look for in your current handler, or that you've looked for in past handlers, or that if you were going to have a handler and you don't have one, you would possibly, what would be the thing that would say, okay, I want him to be my handler, or her?
This way.
Okay, we'll start with it.
Okay, are we talking about more like just like a handler or more like a dedicated like relationship? What?
Either, pick one. Those
Well, if I'm like in a mosh and stuff, I mean, usually how it works in a mosh is one of the handlers who's like in the mosh will notice that a puppy needs some, you know, some attention and go over to them. And so in that case, I feel like oftentimes the handler's going up to whatever puppy needs it or something. But when I am in a public situation, and it comes down to like choosing a handler or one to like just partner with for like a demonstration or something like that, I'm really looking for someone who just like I'm confident knows their stuff. It seems like they're aware of their surroundings and maybe that I've seen like handling well with other puppies. If I was looking for more of a serve relationship, I think probably the biggest thing is someone who I communicate very clearly with and who we were very good at communicating our intentions and like what we wanted with each other, I think would be the most important thing.
I'm in a pack situation. I'm in a pack of 4. We have an alpha and 3 pups. We do not have a per se handler, trainer, master at this point. It's something that may happen down the line, may not. We don't really know yet. So my alpha really fulfills a lot of those roles as handler and trainer as well. For me, it's the number one thing is the level of trust. He and I know each other very well, very intimately, and as does he know everyone in the pack very well. And that level of trust is just one of the most important things for me, especially out in a public situation. Like we said, he's looking out for our safety, for our well-being, trying to keep grabby hands away from us. So that's where I am right now. Of course, that could change too.
For me, I definitely agree. A lot of people have talked about having this like high level of trust with a person. John, I've been in a relationship for going on 5 years now, so that's something that's 5, 6, you know, a long time. But I wanted to speak a little bit to the other side. Sometimes, if I'm in a mosh situation, I like to find somebody who's new and maybe doesn't know what they're doing. While having somebody that does know what they're doing is amazing, I think there's nothing better than seeing the look on some person's face when they're interacting with a puppy for the first time, and it's just this like overwhelming sense of wonderment, and it makes me happy as a puppy and as a person to be the one that's giving them that. So in like a mosh situation, I would look for somebody that maybe doesn't really know a lot about it and is just kind of experiencing it. But then on the other hand, I do agree with what Spiker and Coco said.
We've talked about trust. You heard that word from all 3 of them, and they said that that's what they think makes a really good relationship, whether it be a handler relationship or a trainer or an owner relationship. Just a quick question, and then I'll take the question from the audience. How do you know that you have that trust? What are some things that you look for, or that you would find with someone, or you could point to say, yeah, that trust exists?
I'm always going to be the first one. So I think a lot of that trust it's built up in 2 different ways. The community is really great. First of all, our community does a wonderful job of self-policing. If there's someone who is a really problematic handler for you to even interact with once in a public situation who might show up, we're pretty good as a community at warning each other of those sorts of people and making sure they don't really get into our spaces. So that is nice, and that just, people do build up reputations in this community after being in it for any amount of time, and so that's something that's always really important. If it's a handler I haven't interacted with, a lot of who's interested in playing or something, the first thing I'll do is ask them have you played with any of my friends? I don't know you that well. Have you played with my friends before? Can I ask them how it was, just to be safe? Otherwise, it's just people I've known longer. I'll definitely let do more with me, and a large part of the trust is just spending time with someone and building it up.
For me, a lot of it is communication. It's very, very important to get to know someone before you put that level of trust in them. And one thing I see a lot with other people, and which is a huge red flag for me, is someone who are in a hurry to enter into a relationship and they want it right now, we've got to do this now, without having that opportunity to get to know each other, to build up that trust, to have that communication, to know what works and what doesn't work. Yeah.
For me, when I know that there's a person that I have built trust with, I think a lot of it, something that's really important is the mastery of nonverbal communication. it's a testament to how well we work together if they're able to convey, if I'm able to convey to them my wants and needs while I'm in headspace. Because it does take a long time to get to know a puppy or a person, and so when I think, okay, this is a person that I can definitely work with, the first things that I look for is, am I able to be my puppy self, but then still get the things that I want and need without using like verbal language or the English language.
But then there's just some like obvious red flags, like if they pour their milk before their cereal, don't trust them.
That's, yeah.
This one's actually for Scout. As a pup that's also little, we've talked about how they kind of interact a little bit. But your headspaces, are they like compartmentalized? Do they ever intermingle? How does that work being a little and a puppy?
They intermingle all the time, actually. That's why I like puppy play so much, is because it's so similar, right? It's like when you get down to the bare bones of it, it's a regressive headspace, right? Whether you're acting like a child or a baby or whatever, or a puppy, it's still acting like something a little bit regressive. I mix them all the time. I'll sort of bounce in between them. It's a little weird. It took me a little bit to be able to balance them as well as I can. I think just a lot of time practicing and being with people who are also into the same kinks. Like, I know a lot of other puppies who are little, so spending time with them and watching them kind of bounce in and out of the head spaces really helped me to find out how I can do it better myself. Were you looking for like specific examples?
I didn't know. I was just wondering if it was like, if they if they merged together, or if you had like, sometimes you're a puppy, sometimes you're little. You answered.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon to lift up his hood and to find a pacifier.
Yeah, it has a little paw print on it, yeah. And then I love Buster Bear, he's my teddy bear. But yeah, I mix them a lot. I mix them all the time, it's fun.
So I have an interesting question. We talked a little bit about handler headspace, and one thing that I've never had a chance to talk with is how the puppies view that. And is there anything specific that you guys do to help your handlers get into headspace? Are you aware of it when you're in headspace and they're in headspace, where sort of both cylinders are firing at the same time, and then after they get you out of headspace, do you find that they have a hard time getting out of headspace or not, or is it something that isn't really thought about much?
I think you can definitely tell when a handler's in headspace, because it's not unlike watching somebody play with like a real dog. I mean, you can tell they get kind of like jumpy and, oh, good boy, like, you know, they use the words and actions that you would if you were interacting with a real dog. So yes, I think it's really easy to tell when a handler's in headspace. I haven't dealt a lot with seeing handlers get out of headspace. I couldn't imagine that it would be much different, seeing as that it is just the same of being in a different frame of mind. But I don't know, do you?
I'm in a little bit of a unique situation because
It's weird because we're like almost always in some form.
my lifestyle is that, you know, when I'm I'm in some sort of authoritarian role over a bunch of people because I'm a professor. And so when I come home, I still am in that, well, if you will, daddy type of mentality. And it's very rare for me, even in the bars, it's very rare for me not to be in some form of headspace and protective. That's just who I am as a person. So for me, it comes very naturally. There are times that I become much more playful, and I identify myself as being much more playful, but that depends on the puppies that I'm with. You know, we have a puppy that comes from Florida frequently that stays with us. That the first thing that I do when he comes into the house is take his mouth shut. Because he tends to bite a little too much. So as soon as I see him, I automatically go into that trainer role. And just his presence puts me in that because, again, the safety of we're never going to teach him not to bite, so we learn to. And so I guess I go deeper the headspace, if you will, than other times, but there really is not a time when I'm not in some sort of either daddy, trainer, or handler headspace. And that's me, it's very unique, because there are people that are not, that don't do that. Did that help?
Well, sort of, and I can echo your situation, because I'm in sort of a similar situation. But, you know, one thing I noticed is that, you know, I never really get out of it either. And, like, for my alpha, who's also my partner, there are definitely some social situations where, you know, I find myself being a little more authoritative over him, and you know, usually nobody notices. But especially, like, with family that aren't, you know, big on the kink side of me and all that. You know, like my sister's occasionally, like, you should be nicer. And so I'm curious if that ever comes up as any sort of, you know, thing to look out for, or if you guys have a little easier on that end.
With Scott, originally, when we first started, I really kind of had, Bruce and I were together, and I really kind of had, we had a little bit more of control over him. Part of being a good handler or a trainer, and you'll hear this from a number of other people as well that talk about this. I think Shane Hutchinson says it better than I will ever be able to articulate. But part of this is being able to understand that although you're trying to keep them safe as an owner, and I'm speaking as an owner now, an owner, however you would define that, though you're trying to keep them safe, you still have to let them grow. And part of that relationship that they entrust you with is providing that safe space for them, but allowing them to be able to define themselves as to who they are. And those definitions change with time. If you don't allow those definitions to change, or the individuals to change with time and find out new things and find new kinks and find new ways of going about doing things, then your relationship will become strained. It just will. And so over the course of time, I have let him go. But when there are things that I know that he's going to do in that relationship, because I've been there, or because I've seen other people there, or because it always ends the same way, because I've seen the human interaction over and over again, I'll put my foot down and say, no, you're not doing it this way. And he's Italian and very stubborn, and I'm German and very stubborn, and so sometimes it ends up being the stubborn puppy going off and pouting, and you know, eventually we come to some resolution, but there are just certain things that I will draw the line on, regardless of how much of an alpha he wants to, because I know in the end that it's not going to be good for him, or that he's not ready for it yet. And he has to trust me as the handler, owner, trainer in that relationship that I know I'm doing, and that's where that trust component comes from so much. Yes.
Going off of what Scott was saying a second ago, I happen to be a member of the furry community, ADL, and now, puppy community as well. And I've noticed that in the topic of pet space and so on, not only when I'm in the space, I'm not necessarily like a little boy. I'm actually a puppy. Like that just seems more natural to me for one reason or the other. And I've noticed that when you have some sort of hood on, when you have your head from like your fursuit, whatever the case may be, that seems to help a lot with that headspace. Have you ever played with that multi-economy at all? No hood. Maybe what are your thoughts on like the hood headspace that you use?
For me personally, I love my hood. It's my favorite piece of gear. It really puts that like final touch on my headspace. Just being able to feel, enclosed and see my snout and feel my ears flopping. But there are also a lot of puppies that don't wear hoods, and they seem to do just fine without it. I love mine, and I know Bouncer. I've never seen him out of his hood. He loves his hood. I never once have I seen him out of his hood. So hoods are not a lot of people. No, so yeah, hoods are huge. Can you guys think of anybody like super great that doesn't like hoods? I can think of
well, now you're putting me on the. Yeah, I used to use a hood like all the time when I'm moshing stuff, but lately I've been not using it because I prefer to be able to like be more like expressive with my face, and also hoods make it really hard to do like things like play with squeaky toys or you know eat or do water things like that. So I often go without a hood, and I can see the advantages and disadvantages of it. But for me personally, I don't think it does a whole lot to change whether or not I can get it in space.
My pack has it stated we don't like to have our hoods on as much as possible, just sort of or just if you will. But what really triggers the headspace for me is when the leash gets clipped on. And once I hear that click, that's my trigger right there.
For me, it's the squishes. The second someone puts a hand like right here, I'm out to light.
I think it's very individualized.
When puppy play intersects with other kinks, is there a difference in the kind of aftercare you provide as a trainer? Are there differences in the aftercare you look for as a puppy? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, and it's a very great question. Unfortunately, I'm going to answer that with an it depends. Do you mind if I get a little personal? Okay. We do bondage play and other things with him in puppy mode, and so the aftercare comes not just with bringing him out of the scene from the bondage or from the restraints or the rope play, etc., but also then bringing him up out of puppy space as well. And so it's a more prolonged, and I think intuitively I started dealing with the scene first and controlling the scene and bringing us together out of the scene, and then focusing on aftercare of him as a puppy. Whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's how I started doing it, and it seems to work well for us. There are other times when we're doing that and he's not in the puppy headspace. It's just purely BDSM, and that's a little different. But then it's just aftercare and scene control. Did that answer your? What about from your perspective? Yes, or are you any of you? Because all of you are as well.
Well, like you were saying, there's two elements to coming out of that. There's the BDSM aftercare and the coming out of puppy space as well.
Yeah. I don't know if it like changes the aftercare for me. Either as a because I switch. I'm a puppy and I'm a handler sometimes as well. And for me, it's sort of maybe I visualize aftercare as like a sort of like a set of blocks or whatever. And if you've done this scene, you need this block afterwards. You need this block afterwards. You sort of combine the ones that you need for that one. So it's sort of like a modular stacking system for me. I would say, like, if I've gotten beaten, I need cuddles. If I've gotten tied up, then I'd actually prefer to be able to, like, move around. If I've been gagged for a while, I prefer to be able to talk for a bit, things like that. So it's sort of like this modular thing that just adds up on itself.
I guess for me personally, I would like physical aftercare first, like if we're doing like a spanking scene or a bondage scene or something like that. And this way I can still like be in my headspace and still enjoy it. But I think being in puppy headspace for me makes aftercare more enjoyable. So let's say I've been in handcuffs or something and my wrists are sore, so we'll get the handcuffs off and then I'll relax my wrists, or he can rub my back if I've been tied up for a while. And then once the sort of physical aftercare is done, then move on to moving out of headspace aftercare. So I don't think it changes it. I think it just makes it a little bit longer. Just like Rapogo said, you have to deal with one thing at a time.
And I think if I can add one more thing, if I'm doing scenes that involve like more than one thing that sort of like needs to be separate, like there's some flogging and then there's some other stuff and there's some other stuff. Both as a trainer and as a puppy, I find that you can sometimes manage to put your scene in order to where like one activity sort of takes care of some of, like I find puppy space very therapeutic. So after like a pain scene, if we had a cuddly puppy scene right after that and stuff, then the puppy scene in a certain way does become a sort of aftercare for the pain scene, and then it goes on. So if you order your scene in a certain sequence, I think you can sort of make your kings work as aftercare for each other, even.
Well, I have one quick thing I was going to ask on that from my perspective, and then I have a question, or I have a statement I was making to kind of turn over the panel. So like, I know for that, for instance, I personally with my puppies, I usually, like if we do a heavy intensive headspace scene, when we then are going to move into, like if it is going to be like something sexual afterwards, or like even another scene, like a bondage scene or something like that, we'll do like a heavy headspace, and then I will slowly bring them out of headspace to a degree, and then move them into the next scene. Because I know a lot of times when you, if they're like, I personally would not take a puppy in heavy headspace and then start binding him up or flogging him or doing something like that, because you're mixing a lot of stuff in his head, and especially if he's in headspace, while before he might have been able to, like, unless you heavily plan this out, consenting before, it's very difficult when he's in that heavy headspace, but now you're putting him in bondage, and now you're flogging him, it's a lot of mixing in his mental state. So I kind of like would bring him out of headspace, at least for me, before I would do a bondage or flogging scene or pain scene, I would make him verbal again. So I'd bring him out to where he's verbal, so he can do, yellow, red, black, he can do codes, he can talk to me. I would not move a puppy who's in deep headspace, nonverbal, into any kind of bondage or pain scene, personally. And then, so that was my take on that. And then the thing I was going to mention and then turn over to the panel is, my next question, I guess, if we're done with that. Are we done with that, or is it, okay. So the next thing I was going to talk about and then ask the panel is, I know for me, I have very different, like, and kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like very different handler headspaces based on the different pups I have. Like I have some pups that are just my friends, and so I have a way that I interact with them, and I have some pups that like I handle the trade, so I alter the way I act based on my pups, which I think that kind of makes sense. So I want to kind of turn over to the panel too and ask them, do you act differently as a puppy when you know the different handlers? Like if you played with like two handlers, do you act like a different puppy for each one of them because of who they are as handlers? But over pups, if I have 3 puppies, I will act like a different handler, different aggressiveness, different dominance, etc. based on those pups and how I know them. And then I also have a handler headspace I go into for a puppy that I've never interacted with before, which is different, especially tailored to the fact that I know nothing about that puppy. So I kind of wanted to see if y'all had the same perspective on handlers of, if you have 3 handlers that you play with regularly, do you have a different pup headspace for each of them versus like a handler you've never been around?
I'm going to comment on that just very briefly, and then I'll turn it over to the puppy panel and say that's the sign of an experienced human handler that can do multiple things with multiple puppies at the same time. That experience in being able to flip in and out and being able to do that. If you have those abilities and you do them well, that's the sign of a good handler or a good trainer for training different puppies. To take them where they are and to work with them where they're at, and be able to make those adjustments based on the person or the puppy at the time that you deal with.
I think, getting back to your point too, is my alpha does treat the other 3 puppies, I don't want to say treat, but handles them differently. That goes back to communication. And part of that is we as puppies tell our alpha handler what we want from him too. So it's a two-way street. I get what I want from him, he gets what he wants from me. So like, again, going back to communication, that's for me, that's key. I have personally not played with a lot of other handlers outside my alpha, but I have. And I tend to be a lot more guarded because I simply don't have that year and a half of trust and communication built up that I would with somebody else. That doesn't mean I can't have fun and have safe fun with somebody else. I do, but it's a vastly different experience, and I do find myself a little bit more guarded than I would be otherwise.
So I have different headspaces than any of you that know me, know that I have sort of different types of what puppy I am. I can be like super duper playful, or I can be like the guard dog, like they're big, mean, or it can be like really cuddly. So if I'm in like a situation and let's say I'm at wolf camp and this big burly sir with boots and military outfit comes on to me, first of all, woof. Second of all, I would probably act in more of my like guard dog, military headspace like that because that's what I enjoy, and obviously that's probably what he's looking for if he's dressed like that. So, but if somebody else comes up to me and starts throwing a ball and scratching me all over, then I'll be like the fun roll around, play with you puppy. And I think that just for me personally, having those different headspaces makes it really easy because those are all things that I like to do anyway. So for each different person, I like to play with those different modes. Rococo, do you have anything?
I don't have a great answer for this question since I've always been sort of stray and not incredibly eager to like change that in any sort of way. But I definitely do have different puppy modes when I'm in like a mosh or when I'm one-on-one with my alpha, or depending on like the situation. So I probably would, but I can't say for sure.
So I describe like two questions. First of all, scritches. As a handler, I love giving scritches, and I know puppies love scritches, but not all puppies love scritches. And where is that line to where I'm meeting a stray, or even someone that's collared, and how do I go up, or do I go up and give you scritches? I mean, I think that's a good topic to discuss.
I would just start with first, if they're like not in like incredibly deep headspace or something, like ask. And the second one is if they are in like deep space past the points where like you can really talk with them or something, I would say like I would respond best if someone just like put their hand out like you would with a normal strange dog. If I want you to give you scritches, I'll come up to you and then I'll nudge your hand with my head as a sign of, hey, give me scritches.
Even if you're not, even if you are past the point of talking, even if you do ask them, even though they won't speak to you, they'll probably like wag their tail or they'll probably do something to let you know.
Communication.
Yeah, to let you know. So yeah, even if you don't get a verbal response, you'll probably get some sort of physical response. And I can't really see you back here, but hi, yeah. So yeah, just never underestimate the power of just if you don't know something, just ask, and you'll get an answer in one way or another.
My second question kind of narrows down to you, Scout. You're a guard dog.
Yes.
What makes you a guard dog? What type of training did you go to, and how are you different than a normal pup?
So when I think of myself as a guard dog, it ties into a little bit of the way that I express being an alpha, and that's not necessarily being dominant. While an alpha can be dominant, and a lot of people do think that alpha is dominance, and that's like what makes an alpha, I kind of use it in a more like guidance and mentorship kind of way. So when I'm a guard dog, it's guarding other people from whatever it is, even if it's like something weird, like guarding them against being thirsty, right? Like I would think that if I'm in puppy headspace, I kind of find a reserved, if I'm in that guard dog mode, it's kind of more reserved. It's like half in headspace, half in human headspace, to where I can recognize things that might be that might be needed to be brought attention to. And then there's another part where it is like a guard dog, like security dog. And John and I are working a little bit on that. We're kind of starting to do a little bit more. So I can't say that I've done any like specific training for the second part of your question.
Okay.
But it's something that I'm definitely looking into, whether it be more sort of like military style training or like police dog training. That's something that I would like to experience, but haven't had the chance to explore in depth.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Speaking of nonverbal cues and such, when kinks get mixed in, how do you handle safe words, rack, safety, such concerns?
I have established a stop and check in, 3 arcs, stop and check in. I can stay in headspace, say arc on arc, and the way we play, that we'd stop. Simply check in and make sure everything's okay before we move on. If that means I have to come out of headspace to communicate it, so be it. It's just safety.
I don't really mix getting into really deep, like past the point of communication headspace with other kings often, just because like I personally don't enjoy it as much. But whenever I do, I make sure it's always with someone who like I played with before and I played with a lot. So there's like a handful, like maybe 3 people who I do with, and there are people I play with a lot who really know based on my reactions and stuff, like where I am.
I'm going to speak for both of us. For Scott and I, when we met, we bonded very quickly for a variety of different reasons. And we know each other. I don't even have to say a word, and he knows how my whole day was at work without me even saying anything by the expression on my face, and vice versa with him. So when he's in deep headspace where he's in puppy mode and he's not talking, there are times when he will not verbally communicate with me, but more often than not, when we're doing a scene and he's that deep into headspace, I kind of have an understanding based on his responses to what I'm doing as to what's going on and whether or not I'm going too far because I know him so well. That doesn't mean that there haven't been times when things have gone wrong, but I think just our knowledge of each other really helps with that. And it's kind of like what Rococo said, he doesn't do it very often except for the people that he really trusts. A question from the middle.
So start with the training aspect. What are some of the first things that you think are important to work on?
For a puppy or for a trainer?
For puppy, trainer, both sides.
The first thing that I think is extremely important for a puppy to do with a trainer is the development and establishment of that trust that we've been talking about, which is so crucial for the relationship. I was lucky in that I had that relationship and trust development occur prior to us getting into puppy and handler play, but it's the same with any type of kink. How far that trust and relationship goes is up to the individuals that are involved in it, but that is the first thing. And you know, if Sir Justin were up here, and I'm not speaking for him, I'm not saying anything he hasn't said in public before, he strips his puppies down and has them naked for him initially. Not all of them, but he does that frequently to start building that trust. I don't necessarily advocate doing that or not. It's up to the individuals that are involved. But that building that trust is probably the first thing, because you can't do anything beyond that. I can't teach you how to respond to me on a leash if you don't trust me. I can't teach you how far deep in the headspace is too far if you don't trust me. I can't train you to come when you're called if you're not going to be paying attention to my hand signals if you don't trust me. So likewise with a puppy, I learned so much from puppies just from being around them. And I'm constantly learning. Every time I'm in a mosh, I'm constantly learning something new by their interactions and and the way that they respond to their handlers. And if I'm not paying attention to the cues of my puppy, they can't teach me either. And so that trust is the most important thing to start with.
I think, like even more basic than that, I would say a lot of people are off-put by being a trainer or handler because, you know, I don't know what to do, I've never done this before. What I always tell people is think of what you would do with like a real dog, because when you all break it down, that's what we want to, do. We want to be treated like a dog. So when people come up to me and they're like, I want to be a handler, but I have no idea, I've never done this before. I'm like, well, you know, imagine that I am a dog, not a person dressed as a dog, because it's really the same thing. So like most basic bare bones thing of where to start is maybe like write yourself a list of things that you would do to play with a dog or interact with a dog, and maybe separate it between, you know, somebody that you know well and somebody that you're just meeting for the first time, like, and see how those things are the same or different.
I find it very, I would so most people, like, for their first time, like when a handler is like going for the first time or puppy's going for the first time, the person they're first communicating with them with, they're usually not both starting from square one. So one of the first things I would suggest really is, sort of like making newcomers just sort of like making a mental list maybe of like the sort of things they're interested in. So, and then to just ask, hey, what do you know about puppies and doing vet scenes, or what do you know about puppies in bondage, and sort of there's a lot of people in the community, and if you know what you're interested to and ask someone who you trust, most of the times, except for some very small things that like very few people I know of are even interested in, most people will know someone who is either into it and very skilled with it, or they'll know someone who is, who you can ask.
If I could touch on that just a little bit, one of the first things that I do when I'm having a brand new pup is I take away their speaking capability. That's the first thing that I do. I mean, after obviously I've spoken to them and developed that trust, but that's my first step. And that helps me get to know the pup in the nonverbal communications, as well as the pup can learn my signals as well. And I slowly build that up.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Take away what?
Verbal communication.
Okay, thank you. I missed that part.
No worries.
Any other questions? We're gonna close with a question. One more question over there.
I was gonna make a comment